$67,753 from account 01-01-120-100-500 contingency pending PR change to the following accounts. $64,800 to account 0125-216-100-511 salaries police, and $2,953 to account 01-25-216-100-514 overtime due to the timing with the budget process and negotiating a successor agreement.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 600. The next wage contingency transfer request is for the firefighters, $6,070.
Okay, so in for the firefighters, actually, we're only transferring wages to Niantic Fire. Flanders Fire does not need any additional funding, and the reason that Flanders Fire does not need any additional funding is because they also had a retirement of a longtime employee. So we're we have somebody leaving at the top scale and someone coming in at the probationary scale. So when we looked at the wages in general, nothing was needed. So it's just Niantic Fire.
So how does it end up to a zero balance then, if we don't need to make the appropriation to the other fire department? Is all of the funds from both fire departments now going to the one fire department?
No.
Then how do we magically get to zero?
So the way that when I did the calculations for the police, the remaining balance that we had, I believe it was like 2,500, we allocated to their overtime account. Because there's a difference that, the overtime is being paid at a higher wage than it was.
So the excess funds from the firefighter line that you had anticipated last year went to the police in this situation, is what you're saying?
Yes,
Because they needed it.
correct.
Do they need more than that? Are we going to see another appropriation coming?
You know what? The police are doing a good job at managing the overtime account, because I kind of watched that. In going through the budget, at this point, everything's looking good. The only department we're gonna have some issues with, I think, is the dispatchers.
Okay. Okay.
We've had 2 full-timers out, so they're plugging that hole, the other full-timers, increasing overtime. It's been tough to get part-timers to fill in the gaps. You'll hear more about that, but it's dispatch, very small department, when we're talking about 5 employees or 6.
5 full-time.
So 2 go out,
That's a
40%
lot.
of the workforce.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
And it's
How
an
do you-
operation.
So that's,
Mhm.
plugging that hole has been a little tough, because you're still paying them,
Yeah.
on medical, right? So
Yeah.
you'll hear about that, but again, small budget too, so it's not a big hole to plug, but it's something that we'll see. Every other department's okay. The chief, big difference, having a chief, full-time paid chief.
Oh my God.
Who's taking accountability and responsibility for his budget and lives and dies by it, and stands up there and looks you in the eye. Big difference. Nothing against our fire departments, and these guys are volunteers, don't forget, and they're chiefs of their individual departments, but they're unpaid, volunteer, and they do their level best. And I think their budgets are pretty close to being okay. There's been a little bit of an issue, because we've had some overtime, some turnover there, but I think we'll be okay. More to come on, we'll review that with you, and give you a heads up. But we're back to the firefighters. This is, again, just moving the money over that we anticipated we'd have to pay, so we parked it in the wage contingency into the CBA that we could ratify, send to the Board of Selectmen for approval.
Okay. There's no questions. Do I have a motion?
I'll do the motion. Make a motion to appropriate and transfer $6,070 from account 01-01-120-100-500, parentheses, town payroll pending PR change, end parentheses, to account 01-25-217-100-611, parentheses, salaries, NFD firefighters, end parentheses, to fund the firefighters' contract increases for the 2019-2020 fiscal year.
Is there a second?
I'll second. Oh, boy.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Rich, second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, and the last transfer this evening in wage contingency is for dispatch, $7,177.
This isn't plugging the hole we just talked about, this is just the ratification of their contract, and making up the difference in wages as we've done the last three motions. So we're asking for $7,177.
Any discussion?
No.
If not, I'll move to appropriate and transfer $7,177 from account 01-01-120-100-500, contingency pending PR change, to account 01-25-224-100-212 dispatchers to fund local 1303-436, Council for AFS CME dispatchers agreement. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. With that, we'll move on to old business, public safety building project update. I'll speak briefly on this, and then I'll turn it over to Ann, since she is a member of that subcommittee. Ann Chicello and I attended the last meeting. We put forward a spreadsheet, which I've included in your packets tonight, so you can see the type of information that we should be getting if there is a request for an additional appropriation for this project. My thought process in coming up with that spreadsheet is that we should really understand the full cost of that project, regardless of the timing of expenses and regardless of the funding source. So why is that important? Because a lot of projects, we don't have a mechanism for project accounting in town hall, and so a lot of the costs for various historical projects have not been fully accounted for in a very transparent way. So I think this will help in that regard. It is a request for information. I don't know if we'll receive it, but it's out there. I will say that those subcommittee meetings, I really believe that when the agenda is put together, that there needs to be, if there aren't any subsequent meetings, there really needs to be included on that agenda an opportunity for public comments at the end of the agenda, because what is being discussed in that meeting, there could be some feedback that would be of value. For example, when I was listening to the further reductions in the budget that were being discussed, one of the reductions, for example, was cutting out $36,000 for moving costs of furniture, fixtures, and equipment from the current location to that location, with the expectation that our police would move that furniture, fixture, and equipment themselves. I think that's a bad idea. I think that if that's a cost that wasn't considered up front, it's a cost that wasn't considered up front. Let's put that into the project. If it comes to $6,036,000, so be it. That's what the cost is. I think that we're trying so hard to come in under a number that is not doing the public or maybe the police department any favors. So
Yeah.
that's all I have to say on that.
Thanks. Just on that point, before I mention a couple other things, we had our last meeting was January 7th. We have another meeting on the 21st, and on that topic, so I just don't forget it, of the moving costs. It was an item that came in at the end of the meeting, and so we really hadn't had a chance to really discuss yet, but there were a number of us, already just making points that we see the need for a professional, movers, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's just, the beginning of that conversation. So I felt like we really didn't hone in on that because we were dealing with so many other issues that evening. But point taken. So, I think things are going, well with the project, and I'm personally very impressed with our architect, Brian Cleveland. He is a workhorse. I mean, he worked through the holidays, has produced, construction documents of 85% we still have to complete. He's always available. You can call him if you need to, if you have a question, things you don't understand, whatever. The firm is just very accessible generally. So we're at that point, I would say, full construction drawings, in a few weeks, and then we start to think about the bidding process, and making other decisions along the way. Very good news that there was the modification application that we made to the state of Connecticut, which we were granted, and without much ado. I mean, I honestly, we had an opinion from our own building official, and that worked very well at the state level. There wasn't even a Q&A, which I think the architect had actually anticipated a normal, but they felt very comfortable with that modification / waiver. If you want more detail, I won't belabor the point, but there was a very well-written article by Mary, who is the, is it Bikert, who is the, our journalist, our reporter for East Lyme for the day, and it was, that was January 8th, and she summarized really the guts of the modification well, so that, just in simple terms, the location of the facility is such that, the difference between 135 mile an hour winds versus 145 mile an hour winds, it's not necessary to spend another $250,000. So that was the basic thinking there. But a good article maybe to take a look at. So that was good news. Julie Wilson has done, tons of work besides doing all the minutes and putting everything in every million set of documents in PDF form, has applied for a FEMA grant of $175,000 for the HVAC system. So we're positive that that's going to happen. We'll see where that takes us. There's another grant, I believe, at the town level for IT that's having been applied for. Mark, you can weigh in on that. I don't have the details. So that's another $30,000, I think, or something. It depends. I'm not sure.
It's an $85,000 grant, so we'll also upgrade equipment in this room.
Right. So we may get
delivers it to there,
a piece of that.
Yeah.
Right.
We get all 85. It's necessary.
You get the upgrade for here.
Yeah.
Yes, which is really important for our
Really working on that for a
recording.
while. And
Right.
the sprinklers, Ann, don't forget the
Yes. Yeah.
sprinklers in the building too.
Yes, okay. Possibility of yet even another, not a grant, but perhaps a favorable loan through USDA. So Brian Cleveland, again, I had asked him, do you have any other grants out there? And he, answered me forthwith and said, check this out. So it was a USDA contact person locally. The town does not qualify for some of the grant money because of the median income in the town. And there wasn't a whole lot of dollars anyway for the grants, but there are some favorable loans available. So I have passed that information on to our first selectman, and there's a sort of pre-application meeting that they have, and hopefully we'll put the parties together, perhaps bond counsel, whomever, and Anna, you and Mark will discuss, I'm sure, on that. But that was promising, so we'll see where that, if if that set of, facts is different from, let's say, going out conventionally, it might be worthwhile. So that's about all that I have to report, but we have a huge set of documents at that 85% level, which we are to review as members of the Vision Committee. So, and honestly, it's definite work. There are some things that are beyond my comprehension, like the electrical drawings. So, I have to have faith in that. But it's everything is there's so much information. But again, I'm very impressed with their professionalism, their accessibility, staying on time, answering any questions you have. So, I'm pleased with them. That's it for me today.
Do you have anything to add, Anne?
I think you guys have pretty much covered everything.
All right.
The only thing I was going to say is the police chief, when they were talking about moving the furniture and the equipment themselves, the police chief did say that he didn't really have the manpower to do that.
I don't think
Yeah.
that's gonna be the way to do it.
Yeah.
And
That's not a
then
good idea.
the only other thing was that I think they said that they might not need an independent construction manager, that they would use the staff. And that might end up being some savings also.
We won't use staff. I did inquire about that.
Oh, you did? Okay.
If you want me to speak to that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because you were at the meeting too, you'd be curious. So we have engineers in town, but as they describe it in a casual way, they engineer dirt. They build roads and they understand the art and engineering of municipal civic engineering, not building buildings and structures. And if they were to visit a site and a contractor told them, we did this and this, and this is the 2x6, and this is the wire gauge that we use, they wouldn't, they would understand it because there might be a guy that hangs around Home Depot on the weekends, but they really wouldn't understand it to the level that we would expect the professionalism, and we want to live with this renovation for the next 50 years. So we're gonna look to either hiring a part-time manager. We're gonna also look to the town building committee and see what kind of resources we have there, and how comfortable they feel about managing the job. And they've managed several jobs in our town. But we'll look to that and figure out how we need to manage the system. But I'll be reporting back to the committee on that, I think, on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think too, the architect never goes away during the building process.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
deeply involved. I mean, but the difference is it's not a daily, event for them, but there's always the check-in. So that's one level of oversight, if you will. And then the building committee, to see how far they'll go in doing all that, without a specific person, we'll see.
We'll see what we
Yeah.
do.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to the discussion of the proposed budget process. I believe, Anne, you're the only one that actually came up with some suggestions. But I do have a few ideas about the actual process, so I would like to keep this on the agenda for next month, Anna. So,
Old business?
under old business, just keep it on there for a little bit, discussion of proposed budget process, because when we actually get to the point where we're going to begin the budget presentations, I think it's a good idea to kind of lay out what the process is. Presentations, deliberations, and then how we go about as a team trying to decide what the final number should be. There is a process there that I think that is worth maybe documenting, and
And following.
I'm following, and I have not had a chance to put that together, but, maybe somebody else can help me with that. But at any rate, let's look at what Ann put together. You wanna walk us through?
Well, yeah, so this goes back a couple of months, and we didn't meet in November, and then, we couldn't get to it last month, but nevertheless, and, the budgets haven't been finalized, so there's still time to self-correct perhaps. But basically, again, process works pretty well, very well, but, there's always room for improvement. That was my thinking. and I started, it's not in any particular order, but narratives were always a sort of, it seems to be a pet peeve of board members, and I know myself, being, being very oriented to writing, I often was, annoyed with information not being missing or not clear or outdated. So I think this is an easy fix. I think this is just get someone, if it's not yourself as the department head, someone within the department perhaps to read or review. And it should just be in simple English and be able to be understood so that, and it will save presentation time and also be clear so we don't, we can understand the purpose of the request, Second item, revenue sources. Just a sort of reminder to provide the revenue sourcing wherever it's coming from, and so that we as the board don't have to necessarily ask or find out or sort of piece things together. Most of the time this is an easy thing, but here and there were a couple of instances where I felt it sort of kind of fell into our lap and it wasn't obvious. Yeah. So, and that the departments, I felt like, or even Board of Ed, like, I feel as though have no fear that just because you get grants for something doesn't mean you can't ask for something, defend it, and because tax dollars will be used. I think there's this sort of feeling like, well, if I get grants, or, I really can't, it's sort of a sort of shyness that takes place in requesting for certain things, or not being, clear about certain items. So I feel as though I just wanted to get that in there, that,
I didn't understand that, Anne, when I read it, and you
Okay.
explained it, and I still don't get it. So
Okay.
can maybe you give a concrete example of what you're talking about?
Okay, so I felt this a little bit with the library, where there was just this feeling that, let's say perhaps the range of dollars given for what, let's say, it's not the annual fund,
Foundation.
the foundation dollars, a sort of a conservative number given for that, and maybe needed to be updated. And the fear might have been, well, maybe if we say more, maybe we'll be caught, or we won't get what we're really looking for. So,
So you want people to be
just
above board and
yes,
honest about
ask for it. And
potential
it's
grant
not
money.
saying, dishonesty, but just don't be afraid to speak up and ask for something. Even though you get a grant for something, it's okay that you're asking for it, and it's very possible that tax dollars are necessary. If you show the need and the town can afford it, then that's okay, I think.
Okay.
So, because sometimes there's, or maybe there just isn't sufficient information about the grants, or updating, when they give us the information, maybe, it's, taken a January number, and by the time we see it, that's a greater number or something. So, yeah, just to sort of, but just generally speaking, revenue sources. And with Board of Ed, I had, just some issues with programs that were income generating that I had to kind of hunt for, a little bit more. So I just would like to see that, number of budget meetings, we have a lot of them, but I sometimes felt like, wow, we're cramming all these budget reviews into 10 reviews in one night. And sometimes if one or two required a lot of time, we'd be here really late. So either looking at the nature of the expected review, or perhaps, adding another meeting or two to keep the meeting shorter. But I don't know, that's just a thought. Number 4 was just more like, well, let's get some review before we see it. That's perhaps a little more meaningful. And not that some of this doesn't happen, because I know Board of Selectmen has, in the 2 budgets I've done so far, have recommended certain things be taken out, before they get to us. There has been that level of review. But I don't,
But it needs to be more transparent about those items that are taken out, because some individuals will come to the podium and say, and by the way, the Board of Selectmen reduced our budget, we'd like it reinstated. And some people don't make us aware of that. So I think that's an opportunity in the write-up, you know,
Well, we do,
sometimes you do. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
So for when we update the budgets for any of the accounts where the Board of Selectmen makes reductions in the narrative, we indicate that in bold.
Yeah, I get, that's right, you have a separate item, a line item, I mean, for, Board of Selectmen, I guess their amount, and I guess. you're
No,
saying
in the narrative,
in the narrative.
like it'll say, like, Board of Selectmen reduced this by $5,000
Mhm.
and maybe a brief little description of their, like, thought process, you know, it's written
Okay.
right in the narrative in
Okay.
bold.
Okay, so my
If I
reference,
comment, if I could just add on to that,
yeah,
you might be referencing when I cut a budget at the first selectman level.
Oh, at that
There's a lot of times,
first
they come to you and say,
Yeah.
we want our money.
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I didn't forward it to even the selectmen.
Okay.
I said, no, we
Yeah.
gotta maintain a
Okay, I
number.
see, okay.
And, you know, I have a responsibility for it,
Yeah,
and bring it to
so-
the selectmen. That doesn't always get
Yeah.
into the narrative
And that's fine,
The budget,
to
yeah.
some extent, what I'm really referring to
Yeah.
are the requirements in the charter that require Board of Selectmen to review and review, let's say, Board of Education's budget, you know, with, let's say, some comments and recommendations.
comment and forward.
Right,
Right.
so I think I referenced 6.11 of the charter and 6.12, and I described what those requirements are, and just a little more of that, so that, because sometimes it just feels as though the budgets come out and then they end up here, and, you know, maybe there hasn't been that little extra piece and dialogue and discussion, and,
We'll try to bring that forward.
yeah, I
Okay.
think I think it's perhaps
Well,
helpful.
let's stay on that for just a second. Do you have a specific recommendation, Anne, of how you want that to occur? Do you want a verbal update? Do you want a written report from the first selectman? Do you want it noted in the meeting minutes of the Board of Selectmen budget review? So to say it is one thing,
Yeah.
but how do you ensure that that actually happens?
Well, I
What
mean,
would you like to see?
Well, it could be all of the above, but at least I think if Board of Selectmen at the given meeting where, let's say, they are actually taking a look at, let's say, Board of Education's budget and making some comments and making some recommendations, then I'd like to hear them at that meeting, have that in their meeting minutes. If they want to make a notation or a memo that encompasses that, that's fine. But as long as it's actually done and it's not just at the, you know, a sort of either approval or disapproval without comment. You know, I'd like to hear the comment and the recommendation. So if it's a thumbs up or thumbs down, something in the conversation about that, you know, about the particular, about the Board of Education budget.
So you would like to hear more discussion when the Board of Education presents their budget to
Yes,
the Board of Selectmen?
yes, and before that presentation gets to us,
Mm.
so that we, you know, because there may be something that,
That we don't know
that
about.
we don't know,
that
right,
we wouldn't even think about.
right, exactly.
Now, are you talking about just the Board of Education or also the other departments also?
Well, there is, in the charter, there is that requirement that, that the Board of Selectmen review the agency and department budgets before they're presented to Board of Finance. So, all I'm saying there is, you know, if there's something that needs to be eliminated or added, that's just followed, you know, in other words, the charter provision is followed. I'm seeing it more, I guess, with respect to Board of Ed, where it, you know, where I feel as though, I think it's the 6.12, that provision, you know, needs to be adhered to, I think. You know, I just think we need to hear it, that's okay, and, you know, we can, it's easier to work together than just being, you know, Board of Education comes here and then who knows what happens, so. That was just particularly after last year's experience. And then number 5, this is just, I mean, I don't know how to solve this in the time that we have between now and the next budget, this budget cycle. But there are, you know, for example, Board of Education budget and the library budget to some extent have multiple budget documents within them. And sometimes, you know, you're trying to cross-reference something. So for example, like maintenance, and you're trying to figure it out for the different schools. an at-large or at district level or whatever, and it becomes difficult. So I'm not sure, how you create that integrated document, but sometimes I don't feel like the budget summaries always reflect, a true summary. So and again, I'm no expert in that, but I just feel like that's a deficiency, and it may be something that has to be corrected over time. But I know myself that that's the budget that, not only because it's a huge amount of money, but I spend the longest time figuring out. That's
So I think the way so a goal is kind of loose, right? You don't want to make it a mandate,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We're not going to approve your budget unless you do it our way.
Yeah,
You
no,
can't do that.
that's fine, but
But
just a suggestion.
I think, but where does the suggestion go? Like, this isn't for us then.
No,
So-
these are
And
thoughts
there's-
in my head after my experience. So I, in terms of having consensus, or I just figured somewhere someone should start writing this stuff down.
So,
So
if I'm kind of reading what you're describing, that the different connected items appear in different places throughout the document, and perhaps a formatting where if you wanted to, for example, you mentioned maintenance.
Right.
If you pull maintenance out and you have everything all together on that topic, no matter whether it was district-wide or at Flanders or what have you, if you had all that information consolidated in one view, that would make it easier for you rather than flipping through to find it in the different portions. 'Cause I
Right.
remember from when I was on the school board that it can get tricky looking at these different facets. So perhaps with the joint meetings that Board of Finance and Board of Ed are having, I'm not sure if those
They're
are still
over.
ongoing. They're over? Oh, okay.
There's two.
Oh,
There's two
two.
meetings.
Okay. But perhaps somehow it could get transmitted to departments. I'm sure there must be some other than just the Board of Ed, where the budgets are complex, that perhaps if there were different views to be able to be had. And I haven't seen the budgetary process yet, so
yeah.
I'm not sure where the complexities
Yeah, I just-
lie. But
it's-
if there's some way to simplify
Yeah,
things.
I think that's
But I think we need to be clear on what we want teased out, because, you could be interested in maintenance, I could be interested in something else, and
Right.
somebody else, and,
Yeah.
and so we gotta be reasonable
Sure.
in how we approach this, and
Yeah.
I agree with you, it's.
I don't think I'm the only board member who has found, some
Well, budgets are
difficulty.
horrible, I mean, these are horrible things to read.
Some difficulty in reading those 11
wait.
documents and consolidating them. Whereas for a given department, obviously, it's less happening and,
Yeah.
less massive. But there has to be something in there where there's, to me, something that integrates on the order of what you
Especially
suggested.
if there's a change in the budget or something,
So, it's a goal, but again, it's something that maybe we don't end our dialogue, which would bring us to number 6 on this sheet. We don't end the dialogue, but as we continue conversation with Board of Education, that, library may have a cleaner set of documents this year, I don't know.
They do.
They do, okay, so that's, I've heard that, I guess, that's a good thing. So with respect to Board of Ed, maybe that's a conversation that's kind of ongoing, and with Mariana, and, because she, and Jeff do produce that document, so, a set of documents, so, just a thought. Number 6 was really aimed back, because I wrote my document 2 months plus ago, so, this number 6 was really intended to talk about what we would be doing at the workshops, so, and I think, you all handle that, so,
But not really, and I'll tell you why, because, I think it's good, and I think it's a really good idea, but from this board's perspective, we don't really understand yet the financial status of the town for the upcoming budget cycle. We usually hear that secondhand from the first selectman and the finance director. Like, we're getting updated on that after the budget is already created. So if 6 is an actual goal of yours or a desire that you would like to see done, I think that's really for selectmen responsibility to get to, and maybe you do, I don't know, get together with Jeff Newton and say, oh my God, here's the challenges we're gonna face this year. We're gonna lose, $200,000 in pilot money. We have to make up for that somehow, so work with us. It would be more, at that stage of the game when they're crafting their budget, this is
Yeah.
the guy that knows more about the financial status.
Well,
Yeah, I had a meeting with Holly Cheeseman today and talked about legislative initiatives, and one of them is, why is the state budget adopted after the town budget?
Yeah.
When we rely so much, and then we're not talking one town, we're talking 169 towns,
I know, it
plus all the
doesn't make
districts,
sense.
blah, 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 blah. So it was asinine. Our municipal fiscal year should start on October 1st. And we should be doing this, we should be doing this in the summer. After, I know, but
it's
think,
true.
we open the windows, we come in shorts, in Hawaiian shirts.
true.
But at least we'd know the number. Because we
Yeah.
can,
It's a
2 years ago, Camille, we sat here with Malloy's, one of Malloy's final budgets, and it was dead on arrival when he announced his budget. They all laughed him out of chambers. They came up with their own, that was dead. It went,
It's
and
terrible.
the budget got adopted in November.
Yeah, right.
We started our year in July, and we're just praying that we got some of the money they said they were gonna give us, and made it up. There's that part of it. The other part is, some years it's just gonna be more expensive than other years. And if you have a hard line, and we've been able to maintain pretty stable budgets working together. But if there's a number, a do not cross number, I don't know what it is. And I don't know if that's possible. Some years you might have just more expensive. The IT is coming in heavy with that department, with the education, and we're having huge security issues with the police. We really need more police, and you'll see that in the budget and some other issues. Some years it might be a $2 million increase, and some years it might be a $500,000 increase. And if it isn't, it isn't. Then just give us the number and we'll get the budget to that number. Why go through the whole process? Why go through defending the budgets if you have a number in mind already? I think that's your point in your white paper here is have a number that they can not be far-fetched and reaching for excellence in their schools and needing to upgrade their technology. If we can't afford it, we might as well just tell them now.
Right.
Why go
Well,
through the exercise? I would tell them 6 months ago. Why go through the process of
I think, yeah.
doing all that they do to come up with
Because
this?
we don't have a whole picture.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna say
Right.
no to a $900,000 technology request if I don't see the whole picture.
I think,
Right,
We
but-
can afford it.
But in the end, if
There's a
you're
lot of pieces.
right, and I don't know what we can afford,
Yeah.
right? So,
So
yeah.
my thinking in this number 6 was really less a definitive number and more just keeping that communication open, and ongoing between, with the town
Yeah.
side and Board of Education side. And I really am probably a little conservative on this. I'd like to see us maintain our oversight role and not get too
Yeah.
in the weeds with them. That's
Yeah.
very important to me. What I was suggesting is that it's more an informational exchange. So, keeping them apprised of stresses and strains on the town side, and they can keep us apprised. I really would like to see representation. I mean, this is from Board of Ed to these meetings on a regular basis, to our meetings, just because I feel like that the communication piece is getting lost. I mean, I have to be very honest, I feel like it's getting a bit lost. So it would be very helpful to have either, someone there come here all the time, but, it's not that it's fatal or anything, but I do think it's important because, for example, an outstanding lawsuit that we have, let's be updated on that. Or, I think it's very important that we keep communicating. And I think that makes that budget process all the more easy, If we suddenly see each other, 7 months later and they're, and then we're at loggerheads, I don't think that's optimal. And that's about, and then, keeping it positive. I know it can get testy when, but that was just a little point I wanted to make. And then number 8, if there's any agent, the department suggestions, I mean, I'm sure, Mark, perhaps you've heard things that could be helpful to the process, that, do this, don't do that, this might be a better way of approaching. So if that comes to pass, then pass on that information, if you could.
You know what that's gonna be? Just give us what we want, and all is good in the world. All is right in the world.
But
They're in a municipal environment, they know.
They know.
And every year I start the year off, my department head meeting,
Yeah.
sit in a circle, and it's a great
Circles are
group,
good.
and we share what's going on in each department, and we get to learn, and then it's amazing perspective I have. Watch the synergy happen. All of a sudden, this department can help this department with this particular need. Oh, I didn't know you were doing that, and it's amazing what happens. But we always start the year off saying, well, budgets are due, and it's going to be a lean year. It's gonna be really tough, and we're gonna be cutting, and they, like they haven't heard that from every first selectman since the day they started. It is what it is, but maybe, I urge that you respect their dedication to the town,
Yes.
that they are dedicated, they're professional in their discipline. They know better than anyone else in town, including me, including you, how to run their department. I think that's important to remember. I think sometimes that gets maybe misinterpreted, but maybe lost. And sometimes the details are delved into so deep that they feel challenged that they don't know what they're doing. We're talking about money here, we're talking about their budget, and I think sometimes that gets lost. That's just a message that can go out there.
The flip side to that is, and I understand what you're saying, and, I'm that person that's gonna ask every last question that I can think of to make sure that we're giving the best product to the taxpayers. On the flip side is, encourage your department heads to not be so defensive. This is a process, it's nothing personal, it is all about the numbers and what the town can afford. And so, I would communicate to them that when decisions are being made, that there is no personality involved with that, it's just the numbers.
They understand the numbers part. When the conversation stays with the numbers and how those numbers affect, and that's absolutely fine.
I think a last point is just maybe I put in my, I didn't have it in any particular order, but maybe narratives come first, because, you really have to have the story with the numbers and explain yourself. So the more you can be clear in a narrative, the less I'm going to question. I mean, if you can think ahead to the possible, questions, and it doesn't have to be terribly long, but, defend yourself well. And I just make sure the narratives are complete, so that someone picking up the document who knew nothing about the numbers could say, wow, you're making some really important points here. You're being very clear about what you're asking for. So, for me, that's actually what I look for. And if I can't understand your narrative, then that's a problem.
We've worked on the narratives through the process.
That's great.
I think
That's great.
We've expanded them when we think we can anticipate the questions, and what you'd be looking for detail. And
That's
sometimes
good.
it goes sideways, and
Yeah.
but
It's not
you're looking
perfect,
for something
sure.
else, and we tried to give you everything you could over here. But we've worked on the narrative.
That's
We've
good.
focused on the narrative.
Yeah.
We're mostly through the process now. We're now going through the second round
Yeah.
of review.
Yeah, and
But the narratives are
yeah,
there.
and similarly when
Yep.
department heads arrive and have to present.
You mentioned story. I think maybe that's a good place for many of the department heads, especially with 3 new folks here, not that you're new to town, but to introduce themselves, but talk about the story about where their department is today and where they anticipate their department to be in the next 12 months and how the budget reflects that. I mentioned your building department, our building department, that you see all that revenue, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue, but that correlates directly to work. And it always, often correlates 12 months later to work. So someone's gonna come in and pay the fee,
But the
do the
building
rest of the
doesn't go
engineering,
right.
do the zoning
So
approval, do the
cyclical.
blah, blah, blah. And now they're in the ground, and now the building inspector is out there
Yeah.
every 24 hours for the next 6 months. But meanwhile, there's another one, and there's another one, and is another one. So the workload that we're collecting this year is for next year. One small example, but that's a great story to tell. That's a great
Exactly.
story to
Makes
tell.
us
It helps us
understand.
understand.
Yeah.
And they set it up that way. Now you go into the budget looking for it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Maybe we'll start with a narrative, verbal narrative.
Yeah, I mean, when I say narrative,
From
I.
every department head as an
Yeah.
introduction, because
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
got to be reminded who they are. Some of
As
them you only see once a
We
year.
need to share our narrative with them, because
Right.
our agenda is different. Their
Right.
agenda is to run their department, our agenda is to represent the taxpayers in the
Right.
town, you know.
Sure.
So there's an inherent rub.
Right. Right.
Because
right.
we have two different agendas that we're trying to come
Right.
together, so we also have to share our story
Right.
in what we're looking for. We would love to give everybody everything.
Yeah,
that
and you
we
won't
have another
see
customer.
Yeah, I mean, we're well beyond wants. We're needs-based mostly, you
Right.
know, and we go without sometimes too.
Mm.
But absolutely, and ultimately, you want the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you know, we all want to deliver
Which is what you
great
accomplish when
services
you
and
do your
products
yeah, when
to
you
a
do your
great
circle,
town.
Yeah.
trying to come to a common understanding.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, very good. All right, with that, should we move on to?
Yeah.
You're
I'm all
there,
set,
Anna?
all set, okay.
So Anna, we'll keep that on the agenda under old business, carry it forward for a couple more. Okay, great. Action